I'm going to introduce our next speaker. She was recently named the incoming CEO for the Florida Realtors, and so we're getting her. She said it was her pledge stage right now as she trains to be the new CEO. Margie Grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Do you want us to just? So what a fantastic way to transition to our next panel. When you talk about heroes in real estate, one of the things we're always conscious of are our up-and-coming leaders and making sure that we're creating an environment for them to thrive and succeed. So today I'm excited to have join me Mary Jo Cowan, Nina Desange, and Katie Johnson. Please welcome our panel.
Yay!
So ladies, today we're going to talk about leadership development. And we're going to talk about how we empower the leaders who are coming up through our industry. And one of the things I want to chat about first is most of our organizations, within your bylaws or your policies, you actually have a process with regard to how leaders come up in your organization. For example, at Florida Realtors, we have a multi-year process where once you're elected vice president, you will ascend to the president-elect and then to the presidency automatically. So it's like perfect on-the-job training in terms of how this actually works. And in terms of looking at this, what I'd love to know from all of you is, as CEOs and senior executives who are charged with implementing the association's goals, how do you look for future leaders and how do you identify them? Katie?
Good question. I feel like I'm constantly trying to learn how to be a leader myself. So there's a balance between me trying to develop my skills and hone my skills, and then also trying to identify others who can work with me and who can help us advance our goals. What do we look for? I mean, opportunity. I always, in trying to hone my skills, I always look for opportunity. As we've heard today, I mean, we got some really good lessons today. Everything I do, I try to learn something from. And this morning with the speakers, I've just a lot to take in. But like Shannon said, you have to ask for it. I have to ask for opportunity. I've always raised my hand and asked to take on projects and experiences and do more than I was expected to do. So to develop my skills and opportunities. So I guess in bringing up leaders, I look to give opportunities. I like to find people who want more and desire to do more, and then create the experiences to let them do that.
Nina, as incoming chairman of a large MLS in California, specifically San Francisco, what are you looking for when you're trying to bring on new board members or looking at people to chair committees? What kind of characteristics are you looking for?
So I think the most important thing is to find like-minded people that can help you achieve your directive. I think that a lot of us in the industry want to move the organizations that we work in forward. And I think in order to have that, you have to have people that are forward-thinking. And it's also important to have people who understand the past. I think if we're always looking at the future and not understanding where organizations were in the past, we can't move forward. So those are the two things I would say are most important.
Awesome. What about you, Mary Jo?
Well, excuse me. On our in our MLS, our representatives on our board of directors are appointed by our shareholders. So we are fortunate that they send us amazing people. A lot of times they have experienced leadership in their local association. Once they're there, then what we really try to do is well, first of all, if they're interested, we'll be able to tell, because they will speak up and they will say. But I think the executive committee finds that, they're looking for people along the same lines with the traits of leadership, with the passion, with the excitement. So when they come on our board, we immerse them a little bit differently than an association in all things MLS and the culture of the organization. And then we see the leadership rise.
That's awesome. One thing I've always enjoyed about CMLS and the MLS conferences is that it's not necessarily always CEO driven. There is always senior staff involved in the management of MLSs as well as realtor associations, and I am a perfect example of someone who benefited from that in terms of that kind of an environment. And I think what some of the staff and the CEOs in the room would love to hear is a little bit about your personal journeys. and sort of how you got to where you are. I will share that I have always counted myself ridiculously fortunate to have worked for some people in this industry they're just thought leaders and just amazing people to be around. Whether it was the CEO in Massachusetts or their legislative director or Bill Martin, I was always invited into the room. I was always invited into the meetings. And the greatest gift they ever gave me was autonomy. It was autonomy to get things done and to succeed. So when you think about some of the people that helped you and that worked with you, can you tell us a little bit about that journey and how that worked? Nina, as a volunteer leader, your journey might have been a little bit different. So let's start with you.
Yeah, so I joined the San Francisco Association of Realtors in 2013. I was at that time the president of the Women's Council of Realtors in San Francisco. And Walt had just joined the association as the CEO. And I was serving on the MLS and tech committee, and a couple meetings in, I think Walt said, I think that you could do this. And I was doubting myself. I don't know anything about technology. I mean, that was my, response. And I think that he really opened my eyes to what was out there and possible for me in terms of career and opportunity. And I went to my first CMLS conference in 2014 and met so many of you that are all out there that I've learned so much from, and I'm so grateful for you guys having conversations with me, for showing me a different perspective of the industry that I don't think that I would have acknowledged or understood had I not attended events like this. So directly, Walt Bukowski, for sure, I would not be here today without him and his leadership, but indirectly, all of you and the conversations I have and being able to experience and meet new people, it's just an invaluable tool.
What about you, Mary Jo?
Just to kind of piggyback on something that Nina just said, it's having leaders recognize leaders. And we had talked originally as part of this panel about mentors who are our mentors, and all of us have said, well, we never really had an official mentor or an executive coach or anything along those lines. So for me, my career started, I was typing listings in, when a dumb terminal, you'll know what that is if you've been around as long as me. And I had leaders in my organization that saw something in me that helped me realize that I could have more, that I could want more, that I could grow. And then I took a class at the community college. Now, this was a really long time ago because I've been doing this 35 years. The class, I remember this, the whole class. It was called Leadership and Human Relationships, and the teacher was John Chisholm. Now, how many times do you remember an instructor? The light bulb went off for me in that class, and then since then I've just been benefit, just like what Nina's saying, of looking for the traits that I admire in a leader and learning from them and living that through them. So I've had some great mentors in CEO positions, and to be honest, when I was a younger, when I would go to CMLS meetings, it was Northwest Council then, somebody took me under their arm. It's just about sharing the leadership and asking, wanting to be involved. And I can remember seeing Lori Janik on stage at an area meeting. I was like, wow, I want to be like her. That poise, that respect, that all of those things. So and Shannon's now on my list of, I want to be just like her too. I don't want to fly Apache helicopters.
I think the guys in the room want to be just like Shannon. I mean,
yeah.
So I don't think there's anybody in the room who doesn't want to be like
It's just about being
Shannon.
willing to learn all the time, seeing what you're looking for, seeing what you admire, and growing that passion.
Katie, you and I have had very similar paths in terms of succeeding in different roles throughout organizations. Through your journey, can you identify some of the people that you looked at and thought, thank goodness for them, thank goodness that I had the opportunity to work with them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, speaking of Lori Janik, there's been a lot of people that have influenced me. I'm not lying at all when I say I learn from every single person I interact with. I mean, you as leaders lead by example. I try to lead by example, and so I'm learning from you as we interact with each other, and I think that everybody on your teams is probably doing that too. So, I think just be intentional about that and try to exhibit those behaviors that you want others to rise into. At NAR, like something about today is there's been so many good nuggets, as Danae said, from Danae and David and Sharon and Sarah, that we can all take back what is meaningful to us. There's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. What Nina and Mary Jo's experience is true too for me in some respects, in that there's people that recognize you. But when you asked me that question earlier and I thought about it, my takeaway is you got to believe in yourself. I mean, you really have to believe in yourself. If you think you're right, you think you're wrong, you're right. Or you think you can do it, you think you can't do it, you're right. I mean, it's really going to be all up to you to make it happen, and that's kind of my experience at NAR. I appreciate everyone who has worked with me, and Lori, I learned from her just like you did. I observed her presence, her style, her grace, and I absorbed that through observation. It was hard I had to convince her to hire me. I mean, as staff attorney 11 years ago, they had a lot of candidates. There was 3 rounds of interviews. I made it to the 3rd round, and at the end, I met all the attorneys, and at the end, she said, "You seem very smart. You are really nice, but you are a litigator, and you don't have the experience that we're looking for in the staff attorney position." And basically what they wanted was somebody to do a lot of contracts and contract review and negotiation. So I had to spend the next 15 minutes at the very end of this, what I thought was a productive interview, explaining how litigating totally transfers as a transferable skill to contract negotiations and drafting. So it was kind of tough. When I told Ralph Holman was my direct supervisor, I've learned so much from him. Every single year during our review and development meetings, I'd say, I want to advance at NAR. I want to advance as far as I can go at NAR as a lawyer. And I want to be general counsel. And he's like, no, you don't. He's like, yeah, I don't think so. Like, it's not fun. It's not what it's all cracked out to be. But I said, but I do want to, and so I need those opportunities. And so he said, okay, you should learn. And so he helped expose me to those opportunities. And then finally, when I went for the general counsel role, nobody knew I was doing it, first of all. And then Dale Stinton, the CEO at the time, did not know who I was. Like, I had never talked to him. We'd never interacted before. He definitely just interacted with Lori at that level. And none of them, Dale, our head of HR, and Chris Polychrone, our incoming vice president, they'll tell you, like, none of them thought I had a chance whatsoever, just because I was off the radar. And so I had to convince them, and I prepared, and I worked so hard, for every interview to convince them that the opportunities that I had cultivated and raised my hand for and participated in the last 6 years was totally relevant to the job at hand. So. Yes, you need people who believe in you, but I think you also need to very strongly believe in yourself.
And I think that's a terrific message to our volunteer leaders in the room in terms of making the decision to take the next step in leadership and putting your name on that ballot. Nina, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got to that ballot and how you were elected chairman.
So in San Francisco, our board of directors elects we call president or chairman. It was really about having conversations. We are very fortunate that we have a lot of past presidents that are still at the table, and they do a wonderful job in nurturing the incoming leadership and showing us what where we've come from and where we're going, and supporting us in our process. So that journey of starting from MLS, vice chair to Women's Council to YPN. And now serving as president-elect of the association has really, it's the past leadership that told me, you can do this, right? A lot of people in this room, when I was saying, I don't know if I can do this, were giving me that extra encouragement. And I think sometimes you need that. And it wasn't that I didn't believe in myself, but it was just that there was a part of the organization that I just didn't understand. And so having those leaders really give you the perspective made it a lot easier for me.
And I think that's why so many of our organizations now have either president or chairman-elect, and then that ascends automatically because you have that on-the-job training and you have that opportunity to serve. So one thing that was fascinating to me when this panel was outlined for me was that I was going to be on stage with 3 incredibly strong, talented, and dedicated women. And as we sat and had some conversations, it occurred to me that in the boardrooms across this country, there is a little bit of a chill because of all of the things going on in the news. And someone asked me recently whether or not the Pence rule had affected me. And I was embarrassed because I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said, oh, there's this story that the vice president won't meet behind closed doors one-on-one with a woman. And I said, no. And they said, yeah. And I said, well, the good news is not only have I never heard of this, it's never impacted me. I've been super fortunate that, when people have recognized my leadership capabilities, they did it based on my commitment and my ability to get things done versus my gender. So what I would love for you to share with all of them is, how has this whole Me Too thing impacted you, if it has at all? And how are you also empowering women who are working for you to make sure that they have a voice and that they feel like they're in a constructive workplace? Mary Jo?
Well, I could just stand right next to Margie and say I had no idea what the Pence rule was until I got a copy of the article. So I was like, what's that? I was feeling like, what's going on here? So I can say I've never been impacted by it. I think it comes down to if I did have a leader that I was working with that was uncomfortable for whatever reason, I would probably attribute that to something that happened in the past. I would work to overcome that, but I would also respect it. But I think that when you create that relationship with your leaders in our world, in our industry, it's a whole lot different than being a politician or someone that's going to be worrying. So I have never, ever encountered anything like that or ever had the need to even be uncomfortable. When you have a strong leadership team, it's based on respect. So if somebody said that, I'd honor it, but I'd be a little puzzled.
And interestingly enough, Katie and I have actually worked together, working with some of our volunteer leaders and making sure that there are protections in place, not just in an employment area, but also in a volunteer environment. So can you chat a little bit about the efforts that you've gone to and share with the audience, sort of how important it was to make sure we had that information out there and people had the tools they needed to succeed?
Yeah, sure. So I think that this conversation, there's 2 tracks. So definitely the Me Too, the harassment issue. That's widespread in the news. Obviously, that's a problem with our culture. But it's not one that I have experience with. It's not one that is prevalent in my place of business. But we know it happens. We know it happens at meetings. We know it happens at events. So what we realized through this whole media attention to it is that we were not doing a good job. We at the National Association were not doing a good job of empowering members to understand better right and wrong and to understand how to complain, to make it known when they've felt harassed. So our leadership team did ask, we worked with them to get training for the leadership team, to get training for the committees and the committee chairs, and to revise our policies so that now, and actually they were just meeting yesterday to discuss our new policy, which will be rolled out very soon. But it's just a very clear statement on what's not accessible when you're engaging in NAR business, and if you have encountered the harassment, exactly the steps to follow in order to report it. Because there is a zero tolerance, we need to have a very safe working environment. But that shouldn't scare anybody. I think it's crazy when people say, well, that's so, I can't say anything. Well, no, you can, just be you and be respectful, and you can, and we can have a fun and safe working environment. I definitely think that that's possible. So I encourage you all with your own organizations and your leadership to implement regular training annually would be great, to regularly have this discussion about what's okay, what's not okay, and what to do when something bad has happened. So that's kind of how we're addressing Me Too. But then also, there is a discussion in the real estate industry and in the United States about women advancing in leadership. And I think that we're making tremendous progress. Like, I think it's been real, I mean, look at, you know, these women and look at all the people at the table. Like, we're making awesome strides. Our membership is majority women. Women are leading brokerages. We just have nowhere to go but up, and it's just, we're going, going, going. So I think that the more we talk about it, the better it is for men and women, and the better we learn, because to have that diversity, to have that inclusion is only going to make us all better. And then I guess the last question you asked is what we're doing at NAR. And at NAR, I didn't start it. There was people on my team, women on my team who recognized a need to learn from each other. And so there's a monthly women's networking lunch where there is a topic, there is somebody who's leading the discussion, but it's really just an opportunity for staff, you know, men are invited too, it's usually women that show up, to just share with each other about their experiences or what they've learned.
So Nina, that's the three of us in sort of a employment capacity and senior executive. Tell us about what the environment's like from a volunteer perspective.
So I would say that, the Me Too movement, we've talked a lot about stories here and owning your story, and I think the Me Too movement is about women all across the country that are taking ownership of their stories and really, sharing that with other women. And even though, we have not experienced that personally, I think that those stories are real, and they're hard to listen to sometimes, but it is something that women do go through. And I think that in terms of, it's never impacted me. I've never been left out of a board meeting, or, and sometimes I'm the only woman at the table, which is fine, and that's getting better. But I think, computing the two in terms of Pence never wanting to be in a room with a woman alone, I don't think he's ever done that. And, I think that's unfortunate because I think that I learn equally from the men in the room as I do the women in the room. And I think that it's important for both of us to be at the table and to have those conversations and to be open about them and to encourage people to own their story and to be their authentic self. And because I think that that's what the world just needs, a little bit more of that.
So to kind of wrap up, one of the things I'd love for you all to do as a senior executive, as a CEO, as an incoming president, what's the one piece of advice you would give to the leaders in the room about how you build and retain leaders? Nina?
I would say listen. I think it's really important to hear what people want to do. Sometimes the only way that you can hear what a good leader might be better at is by listening to what they have to say and where they're coming from.
Katie?
There's so much. I'd say
There's so much.
There's so much. I'd say lead by example. I try to model the behavior that I think would be helpful for others who want to grow on the team too.
Mary Jo?
I would add that kind of back to the tail end of the last question. When you create an environment for everyone on your team, whether they're male or female, to grow, and you listen and you hear and you identify those traits that you know are going to make a good leader, that you go for that. On the other side, I think that one of the things that I would share as a personal experience is I used to sit in the audience and say, like Lori Janik, oh my gosh, I want to be like her. But I would never have dared initially to approach her. She was totally approachable, but I was afraid. So if you see, my advice would be, if you see someone in the industry that you admire, whether it's your board of directors or on your staff or as your CEO or whatever the situation is, don't be afraid to let them know. Don't be afraid to approach them and say, wow, I really admire this about you. Can you give me some advice? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask. And don't be afraid to let it be known that you're interested.
But really, most importantly, if you could have one thing for lunch, what would it be? Kate,
I already know the answer to that. Pizza.
pizza?
My absolute favorite thing in the world. I could eat it every day.
What about you, Katie?
I'll go with pizza. I love pizza.
Mary Jo?
Well, I could go with pizza, but really I'd like to have cake first.
See, and I want gummy bears. Yeah, so gummy bears and cake, and they're going to have pizza, and you're all invited to the party. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.